Hey kids, it's Mr. Flyer here, hope you're well. Well, today the long-awaited official release from BMW of all the details of the big new GS is out. It's now called the R1300GS. I've got all the details here. I'm not going to give you any corporate flannel. I'm going to get straight into the key specification items and then a little bit of a chat about the things I like and don't like about the bike. So let's get straight on with it. Okay, I'll start straight off with some key points on the specification of the bike, and then we'll go through some of the things that I like and some of the things that I maybe don't like on first glance of the bike. The engine on the bike is 1300cc exactly, and the power has been increased. It's now putting out 145 brake horsepower at 7,750 RPM. That's 9 brake horsepower more than the outgoing bike. It also, in terms of torque, puts out 149 Newton meters at 6,500 RPM. That's 6 Newton meters more than the outgoing bike. So a much more powerful engine on the new R1300GS. Brakes on the bike are provided by 4-pot calipers, now badged BMW, not Brembo. BMW have sort of changed their minds a bit about Brembo and whoever they're going with, haven't they, over the last few years, but they're now badged BMW. But to be fair, BMW brakes have always been absolutely fine. I'm sure these are absolutely fine too. Suspension on the bike is provided by a new version of telelever and paralever, the funny BMW suspension, now called Evo telelever and Evo paralever. More about that in a minute. The seat height comes in at 850mm as standard, but again, lots of options available as well as some technology here. Talk more about that in a second. The weight of the bike now comes in at 237 kilograms ready to ride. That is a 12 kilogram saving over the outgoing R1250 GS, and the tank capacity on the bike is 19 litres, which I suppose is par for the course. When we see the new R1400 GS later in the year, or next year even, no doubt that'll have a bigger tank capacity, but this bike, 19 litre tank. Electronics wise, you name it, it's got it. I'll name a couple of them. 4 riding modes as standard. Radar cruise control that we were expecting. That's dynamic, it changes according to where the car is in front of you. Collision avoidance, lane change assist, that's the blind spot mirror thing. LED headlights and running lights, hill start assist, drag control, keyless, big TFT, etc, etc. You name it, it's got it. Check out the BMW website for all those details. Electronics to me aren't that important, but this one's got some fancy new electronics. And last, while we're talking about key specs, is the price. I don't know the price yet, unfortunately. That's one of the things that I don't know. But you can bet it ain't going to be cheaper than the outgoing bike. Right, so before we get into things that I personally like and don't like about the bike, just a few things that I wanted to point out. First off, this new engine. Glad to say it's still a boxer. Of course it's going to be. It's a GS, but they have made radical changes to it. It's in fact a completely new engine. 1300cc, as I said, but now the gearbox is mounted underneath the engine. Before, it was mounted behind the bike. That is good news because it means that they can package the bike up into a shorter overall length. So the bike itself is a lot more compact than before. And of course, with the gearbox below the engine, that means the centre of gravity is even lower. That's going to have good ramifications for moving the bike about in your garage. This is going to be an easier bike to live with than the outgoing machine. The new engine puts out 145 brake horsepower now, which makes it BMW's most powerful boxer engine to date. And they also claim it's the smoothest boxer engine to date. And together with the changes to the gearbox, they've come up with the new Gear Shift Assist Pro, which they reckon is the smoothest and best that they've had yet. One of the complaints that I've always had about quick shifters on the GS, and in fact any boxer engine bike, is that it tends to be a bit clunky. Well, hopefully we might be getting smooth Gear Shift Assist Pro gear changes in the future on the GS. There's a completely new suspension system on the bike. It's still the funny BMW front and back ends, but this time they're calling it Evo telelever and Evo paralever. It's supposed to not only act well as suspension, but also make the turning and the handling of the bike much better. There's an optional electronic dynamic suspension, which is improved over the old version, which used to change preload and rebound on the fly. Still does that, but now it also changes spring stiffness, which is a first, I think, for any motorcycle. If you're an off-road enthusiast, then there is now another optional sports suspension for the bike. That gives you more travel on the suspension and is designed to make the bike much more off-roadable. Whether, of course, we'll be able to tell the difference when you're riding it remains to be seen. Optionally, and the big news for me, is that the suspension now has adaptive ride height control. We were kind of expecting this. It's completely automatic, a bit like on the Harley-Davidson Pan America. The bike will lower itself quickly when you drive slowly or come to a halt, or indeed, if you're a shorty like me, you can have the bike set at a lower setting from the get-go. And also, there are all sorts of different seats you can get to enable different ride heights and so on. So no issues on the height of this bike, making it much more accessible to a wider range of riders. The new frame on the bike is made of sheet metal and die-cast aluminium. It's supposed to be stiffer than the outgoing tubular version and should make the bike handle better. The bike has front collision warning. This is where the bike basically auto brakes for you if it thinks you're about to hit a car. For me, possibly one step too far. I'm not a massive fan of electronics on bikes, but the bike does have that. It also has lane change assist, which is what I've previously called, I think, blind spot mirror detection, where you have a little light in the mirror that goes off if there's a car creeping up either side of you in your blind spot. I think that's an excellent thing. Cornering lights on the bike look like they really do look around the corner. If you look at the DRL on here, there's sort of star-shaped lights. You can see that part of it actually kind of pokes out, so it really does look around the corner. Optionally, you can get I think it's called the Headlight Pro option, and that does properly look around the corner as well. The headlights on this bike, BMW are making great play of. New projector beam that does both low, dip beam and full beam out of the same light. The styling on the bike is really radical. There's really nothing about this bike that looks like the old bike. It's definitely a lot more compact and a lot smaller and a lot cleaner in design. I'll leave it up to you whether you like the looks of it or not. The bike now has a lithium-ion battery as standard. Again, a weight-saving measure. I think that saves something like 2 kilograms over the old bike. If you look closely, it's quite hard to see at this picture, but the switchgear and the TFT looks very familiar on the bike. So that's good news. You've still got the whiz wheel to control things. So I'm absolutely fine with BMW switchgear. Looks like it's familiar here. So today, BMW announced 3 models to choose from. I'll get this right. So there's the triple black, which is all blacked out moody and looks pretty cool, I think. There's the GS Trophy, which is kind of like the rally one from before, which has the red and white and blue paint scheme. Looks really cool, that one. And there's another bike, which is the green one in these pictures, which is called the Option 719 Tramontana, which I think is a mountain range in Mallorca. I was there a couple of weeks ago. So that's the green one. It's got all the fancy finishes and the mill bits that we've come to know from the Option 719 stuff from BMW. I think I'd possibly go for the Trophy if I was going for it, but that has a slightly higher seat, so I'd have to do something about lowering the seat. But as I mentioned, lots of options for lower seats on the bike. I'd also probably have a bigger windscreen as well, I think. Additionally, you can get with the bike dynamic, innovation and touring packages, which give you all sorts of flavours of the various options available. Check out the BMW website. I'm sure it'll have all the details there. So, things that struck me that I immediately like about the new bike. The first thing is the new exhaust. It's nice and neat and compact compared to the old one from the outgoing bike, which looked much like this. The new exhaust is made entirely from stainless steel, and I think is a major improvement on that old version. I love the look of these non-spoked wheels. I imagine these are an option as well and only on particular types of the bike, but I do think the machining looks lovely compared to the spokes and compared to the old wheels on the old bike. They look a bit dirty on this picture, but nonetheless, I think they look pretty cool. Overall, I think the new design of the bike is very clean looking. And not only is it kind of clean to the eye without all the scaffolding that the old bike had, but I think it'll also make it much more practical, much more easier to clean than the other bikes. So if you're not a fan of cleaning bikes, then this one's going to be much better for you. Adventure bikes historically have been a nightmare to keep clean. This one looks a bit easier on that score. On the green bike, which is the Option 719 one, I think, if you have a little look closely, you can see that they've got a separate nav device where the old Nav 6 used to be. This, in fact, is a new gadget called the Connected Ride Navigator, and I saw a video on BMW Motorrad's YouTube site earlier in the week about this, so if you want to see more details about it, go and check it out. But basically, it's something that you can mount on top of the bike that's not a Garmin sat-nav, but it does give you access to navigation, various bike functions and all that sort of thing, without having to mount your phone on the bike. It's easier to look at, it's a bigger screen, won't suffer from vibration, that sort of thing. So that's a new feature for the bike that I'm quite glad they've kept, because I did like the separate navigation that the old Nav 5 and Nav 6 gave you. A good thing, heated grips now come as standard across the range. Before, I think you had to get the TE version or the touring version to get heated grips on the bike. Just going back to the looks of the bike, which is something that's very important to me, and again, it's subjective, you have to draw your own conclusions whether you like it or not. One thing definitely you can say about it is it looks a lot smaller and a lot more compact, possibly because of that new engine design, but I think, again, that is going to make the bike very much easier to live with. Together with the lower centre of gravity, the smaller dimensions, it's gone from like a big heavy bike to a sort of a medium-sized, somewhat lighter bike, so that's got to be a good thing. I love the idea of adaptive ride height on the bike as well. An absolute winner that. We saw it on the Harley Davidson Pan America. It worked really well. I'm sure this one will work well as well. It lowers the bike when you ride slowly, or indeed when you come to a stop. It loses something like 20 or 30 millimetres from the height of the bike, which is great if you're a shorty like me. You can get your feet firmly on the floor. And in fact, if you prefer a lower bike, I believe you can set it so it's always on the low selection. So that's a great thing as far as I'm concerned. So a couple of things that I maybe was a little bit disappointed with the announcement. I've made a note here, a few things here. First off, no reverse gear. I kind of didn't think there would be, but I've got so used to having the reverse creep mode on my Honda Goldwing. It makes owning a big bike so much better. Of course, with these more compact dimensions, it may not be so much of an issue, but something I've really missed on my GS is having the ability to take the thing back automatically. That would have been lovely to see. Also, no electronically adjustable screen as far as I can see. I can't actually see how you adjust the screen on the new bike. I can't see the knob that you used to have, but certainly I haven't seen any evidence of an electronic screen, which is a shame. Also, I would have liked to see the screen be bigger. All the pictures I've seen seem to have this small screen on, but I'm sure an aftermarket company will be along very, very soon to fix that one. But a bigger screen or a touring screen might have been nice as standard. The indicators, I quite like the look of them on the non-trophy versions where they're built into the handguards. But of course the problem is if you drop the bike, they're going to be expensive because you're going to break those things. So yeah, if you're going to do some off-roading, you better go for the GS trophy version, because on that bike the indicators are actually mounted up on the top fairing. So yeah, I like the look of the indicators in the handguards, but they are going to be vulnerable to a drop. That front light arrangement, the running light, it is innovative, there's no doubt about that, and I'm sure it works very well, and you're going to be absolutely sure when you see a GS behind you, it's going to be quite a unique signature, that light, isn't it, coming behind you at night. But I'm not quite sure whether I like it or not yet. I kind of quite liked the old asymmetric lights on the outgoing GS, which is weird because I always used to moan about the asymmetric lights on the S1000R before they changed them to symmetrical. Now they look much better on that bike. But on the GS, I think that asymmetric look somehow added to the ruggedness. So the jury's out for me on the looks of that front light so far. We shall see when we get to see the bike in the actual metal how it really does look. Bit of a shame I don't know the price of the new bike yet. I'm sure that'll come out in due course, well of course it will, and you can bet your bottom dollar it ain't going to be cheaper than the outgoing bike. I imagine it'll be you know, maybe £1 more expensive, so you're not going to be looking much change out of 20 grand for this bike, I wouldn't think, but we'll see once the announcements are made on the pricing. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't see the launch of the GS 1400 today, which I did expect to happen. I'm expecting that to be the replacement for the current GS Adventure. Now, in the past, BMW have always made us wait at least a year from the launch of a new GS for the Adventure version to come along. So this is in keeping with what they normally do. It's just annoying because we know it's going to come. We know it's going to look like a similar bike. And for a year, there's going to be a lot of older style GS Adventures hanging around showrooms. But if you don't like the looks of the new bike, now's the time to snap up one of those old stock machines, of course. So in summary then, I'm not completely blown away by the new GS. I am a GS fanboy. It'll be very interesting to see how it's received by everybody else. So do let me know what you think in the comments below of the new bike. I'm really pleased to see that BMW have put a lot of focus in making the bike smaller, lighter, and more easy to live with. And the spec on paper at least brings it up on par in things like power alongside other competitors. So 145 brake horsepower is ample for this sort of bike. We'll see how the looks grow on us, but yeah, overall, jury's kind of out on it. We'll wait and see what it's like when we actually get to ride it. So there we go, that's it for my first look at the brand new BMW R1300 GS. I hope you enjoyed that. I'd love to hear your feedback below. I cannot wait to get my hands on one of these bikes and give it a go. I've been badgering BMW UK for some months already to get an early ride on one of these. I don't know whether I'm going to or not, but you can be sure as soon as I get a go on one of these bikes, I shall be bringing you a video. So if you've not done so already, hit the subscribe button and I'll bring you that ride as soon as I can. All right, that's it for now. Until next time, this has been the Mist and Flyer. Cheerio.